Promote a culture of inclusion, supercharge your communication, and unleash the full potential of your teams and leaders with the Inclusive Handbook collection from the Diversity Movement. As part of the collection, I wrote the Inclusive Leadership Handbook with Kurt Merriweather to empower leaders with tools needed to cultivate a culture that fosters creativity, innovation, and employee engagement. Through strategies, exercises, and self-reflection, leaders at all levels can enhance their effectiveness. Learn more at thediversitymovement.com/store. Use code HOL at checkout for 25% of your first order.
DEI budgets are under attack, but the goals haven't changed. Whether you're looking to increase your DEI knowledge, expand your market reach, or gain a competitive advantage in business, we have the solution. TDM Library is your single source for expert-curated DEI resources, strategies, and solutions, all designed to help you transform your workplace culture and be a more effective contributor. For $9.99 per month, you get access to our searchable subscription-based digital library. There, you'll find articles, practical how-to guidebooks, podcasts, award-winning microvideos, and more than 700 Q&As, designed to help DEI practitioners, thought leaders, and executives create a more inclusive workplace. Whether you prefer to listen, watch, or read, we have the resources for you. TDM Library goes beyond the basics to dive deep into topics such as inclusive language, the business case for DEI, talent acquisition, and C-suite engagement. For less than the price of a sandwich, you get access to our library of more than 1,000 pieces of original, expert-curated DEI content. Join today and get your first 30 days free. Get your library card now at tdmlibrary.thediversitymovement.com.
You can't stop me, nothing's gonna stand in my way.
Welcome to the Donald Thompson podcast, and today I have a good friend of mine, Ken Lewis. Ken is a very, very strong business person, very well respected in the legal community. And Ken, welcome to the Donald Thompson podcast.
It's great to be with you.
Ken, as we talk a little bit about some of the macro events in business, what we think about how we can work and grow in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, whether it be the legal profession, whether it be business in general, I want to take a step back and allow our audience some space to get to know you. What drew you to the law?
So it's interesting. There were really three catalytic events in my life that drew me to the law at a really young age. The first was my best friend growing up. His father was a probation officer. And one summer, I must have been 10 or 11 years old, we went to go visit him in his office. And I wandered into the back of a courtroom and spent the day watching lawyers try cases. And for the rest of the summer, I would find my way back to that courtroom and sit in the back and watch lawyers try cases. And that was really the first time I got the idea that I wanted to be a lawyer. So that was the first event. The second event was I started school in 1966. That was really at the beginning of integration in the public schools in Winston-Salem. And there was a plan that allowed you to attend any school you wanted to attend as long as you could provide your own transportation. So my parents enrolled me in a school across town that was in the best elementary school in the city and would transport me from my home to that school every morning. And over the years in elementary school, I began to notice the difference in the development in the part of town where I lived and the part of town where I went to school. There were movie theaters and Krispy Kreme donut shops and ice cream shops and all sorts of nice things in the part of town where I went to school. And there weren't those kinds of amenities in the part of town where I lived. And I just developed an interest. I was fascinated by that. And I developed an interest in why are businesses located in one part of town and not in the other. And the third catalytic event was in high school. I was a part of a group that got exposed to careers, and a antitrust lawyer came to speak to the group. And that was really the merger of my interest in law and in business. I first learned through that talk about business lawyers, and that really set me on the path of deciding I wanted to go to college and major in business, and then go to law school.
That is phenomenal. And one of the things that's a thread between those three major events, right? Your education, being able to see lawyers in practice, and then have somebody come into your classroom and sew into you by letting you know what you could be, right? Raising those horizons. And so exposure, I think, is the big word that I would take away from how you develop that interest in law. When you think about the legal profession and its impact on social justice, what are some of the things that people need to understand about our system of law, our system of how do we think about social justice, that allows people to have a better understanding of things like systemic racism, things like disparity in education? How does some of your experiences help you shed light on those things that maybe most people wouldn't understand?
Well, during the time that I was growing up, lawyers were very prominent in society and in my consciousness, in part because they were on the front line of creating the opportunities that I was preparing myself to one day pursue. And so lawyers like Thurgood Marshall or Julius Chambers in North Carolina, were bringing lawsuits that were opening up the doors of opportunity. And there was a lot of talk among those lawyers and in the public sphere, about what the Constitution guaranteed, the values of the country should be, how those values should be extended to others. And that became a part of really my framework. I went to college at Duke, and the year that I got there, I learned that Duke had discontinued the business major, undergraduate major. And so I ended up majoring in political science and really got interested in how societies are constructed. And in a democratic society, a society that is based upon representative democracy, and a society grounded in the rule of law, the law is fundamental to shaping the opportunities that are enjoyed by its citizens. And the law has worked in multiple ways in our society. The law has enforced discrimination and disparity, but the law has also been used to open up opportunities. And so it's a powerful tool really in both directions, in both closing down opportunities, but also in opening up opportunities.
Oh, that's a powerful way to think about it. So one of the things that you mentioned, whether it is your reference to Thurgood Marshall, Julius Chambers, but the door opening aspect of people on the front lines, and then how that transitions to really how power and progress are limited or open in our society. And the way that laws are constructed, the way that policy and government is made, is very different from the conversation sometimes on the picket line. And if we don't understand how to manage both, it's hard to have that sustainable progress. And one of the folks that we both know, Tanya Williams, that we both think really highly of, one of the things that she was a guest on my podcast earlier, is she's very, very focused on people being educated on policy that will last for decades. While the picket line is important, there's also these other things that are done behind closed doors that we need to pay attention to also.
Right. Exactly. So the law is where we translate our values into rules that we agree to live by and to govern ourselves. And so some of the things that are happening in the streets and in the picket lines are really about giving expression to what our values ought to be, or calling attention to the ways in which our society may stray from our professed values. And so that's very important. And if you look at the history of the country, whether you're looking at the labor movement, or whether you're looking at the environmental movement, whether you're looking at the civil rights movement or the women's rights movement, all of those movements were amplified through public protest and advocacy. which helped to draw attention to the need to create some change in our society. But that society was able to achieve that change through translating those values into laws that then provided the new opportunities that were being advocated for through direct action. So the law is an important tool in giving expression to our values.
No, that's really important. I appreciate that. One of the questions as we look more from the legal side and transition into business, you were quoted in an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about the lack of multicultural representation in the boardroom. Talk to me a little bit about that article, that perspective, and really some things that you think can be done to make change there.
So the Wall Street Journal, as are many publications now, are in the wake of the George Floyd killing and other similar kinds of killings in the country, is taking a deep look into issues of diversity, not only in the criminal justice system, but also in society more broadly. And one of the areas that they have focused on is the lack of diversity in corporate boardrooms and in the C-suite of the largest companies in the country. So there's a way in which we can look at our country today and compare it to 50 years ago and see a very, very different country. We no longer are living in a society that is segregated by law. People are going to school in many instances, although we've had some retrenchment in this area as well. But we're going to school with people of different races, are interacting in the public sphere at restaurants and hotels and stores with people of a variety of races. But if you were to look at the corporate boardrooms in America today and compare it to the 1950s, you would be shocked at how similar the corporate boardrooms in our country look today to the corporate boardrooms in the 1950s. And I think there's an increasing awareness that is problematic for a lot of reasons. And I think the Wall Street Journal and other publications are trying to understand why that is, why change has been so slow in this arena.
What are some of the things that, if you had the magic wand, how would you make that change? Right? How would you create the environment? What are some of the things that you would advocate so that we get there faster? So we're not, or our kids are not, or our grandkids 50 years from now having the same discussion.
Well, the first thing I would do is I would encourage leaders in the country, whether they are corporate leaders or political leaders, but leaders in the country and members of society more broadly, to take a really fresh look at why there hasn't been more change in this space, than there has been. To really whiteboard it the way you would in a business environment, where you try to step away from whatever your assumptions may have been, whatever you have the common understanding may be, pull the curtain back and really do a situation analysis to say, what is the actual situation here? And I think if we did that, one thing that we would see is that the pool of available talent to complete a diverse board of directors is wider and deeper than it has ever been in the country's history. That because of the changes in laws and the changes in society that have occurred over the last 50 years, access to educational opportunities have grown tremendously in those 50 years. And African Americans and women and other people of color have taken advantage of those educational opportunities.
Yep.
They have entered corporate environments in numbers we've never seen before. They have achieved success in those corporate environments in a way that wasn't available to prior generations. And so we have a tremendous pool of available talent out there to have a more diverse boardrooms. So I think that's one thing. Secondly, if I had the magic wand, I would wave it and have a broader segment of society understand that this is not just a fairness issue. This is not just about being fair to people. That this is an issue that I believe that is fundamental to whether we're going to be a vibrant economy, a dynamic economy, a growing economy in the future. That in order to maximize the value creation available to us, that we're going to have to tap into the enormous diverse talent that exists in the country. And it's through people working together, bringing to a problem a set of diverse experiences and ideas and problem-solving approaches that we unlock a dynamism that will create the next explosion of growth in our country and in our corporations. And so I want people to see this not only as an issue of fairness, but also an issue of growing the pie in a way that will be beneficial for everyone in our society.
Oh man, that is the analogy of growing the pie is really, really important. As I work in this space and try to be a positive beacon for diversity, equity, inclusion, there is this concern. If I make available opportunity for someone else, that means there's less opportunity for me. So you mentioned growing the pie, but how do you articulate to someone that has that kind of concerning view? And it's a real concern that middle-aged white men in particular, right? They're like, more opportunity for women, more opportunity for Black people, more opportunity for Latinx, more opportunity for this. What about me?
Yeah.
How do you have that conversation?
That's a real issue. And I think, again, in my hypothetical sort of magic wand and my whiteboard, I think if we were identifying what the problems are, then I think one thing we should identify is that we have the part of our history includes a way of seeing the world in a zero-sum way. That is part of the history of the country. And so this thinking that if someone else is winning, I'm losing, I believe is tied to our history where we divided opportunities and provided them to some and not to all. And some of that's around race and some of that's around gender, but it's a way that we operated in our country from the beginning. And so these ideas, I think, of zero sum are ideas that continue to exist as a part of our culture. And I think the first way that we address those ideas is to identify their source and identify that this is not truth. This is just a legacy of a society that divided opportunities and provided them to some and not for all. And then I would encourage people to think about the other part of our legacy as a country. And this is the part of our legacy of a country that I think is the pathway to the great opportunity for all that exists. If you think about America, the idea of America, let's talk about just the idea of America. The idea of America is a place where everyone can flourish, a place where there is freedom of opportunity, a place where people can come from all over the world and give expression, to their unique talents and achieve based upon their talent. That's the idea of America, right? That's not, we wrote that down in our fundamental documents, but then we also adopted a set of practices that divided and provided opportunity to some and not for all. And so these two things have coexisted in our country from the very beginning. The idea of a place where anyone can succeed based upon talent, and a reality where we divided people and provided opportunity to some and not for all. But if we were to get back to the original idea and create a society that really provided an opportunity for all. The basic idea of America is that the human spirit and human capacity, unleashed from chains, unleashed from dictators that suppress free expression, that will unlock the highest human potential. And I think that is still available to us now. In fact, I think that is the key to our future success. But in order to get there, we're going to have to rid ourselves from some of these old ideas that are the legacy of our departure from the original idea of what America could be.
That is powerful. I mean, both in terms of what you said, but the ease of understanding the way that I was able to accept it, because most people can get behind the original idea of America. And if we start with that original idea, then it's easier to accept that we've gotten off track. And how do we then get back on track to that original idea of America? And I think that the way that our communication mechanisms are set up, there's so much financial prosperity in negativity. And there's not as much money in unity. And so therefore, people are incented to get groups mad at each other all the time. And so we've got to create an environment, in my opinion, where more clear minds can speak openly and disagree strongly, but do so from the framework of how do we get back to this original idea of America. And that's really, really cool. I appreciate the way that you articulated that. Ken, when you think about your experience as a business person, as a lawyer, working with leaders of all different backgrounds, different company sizes, how have you learned to operate being the only one in the room? How have you learned to navigate and continue to grow and prosper, right? And I don't know if you still do it, but if I go into a crowd of 10 people, 20 people, 200 people, I still look around and see if there's somebody like me. I can't, it's built, I just still do it. What advice would you give to those that are learning how to navigate when they're the only one in the room?
Well, it's interesting. I have been in that situation so frequently over the last, this is my 33rd year of practicing law. And so I've been in that situation so much. I still notice it, but it's such a common experience now that it's almost become normalized, which I hate to say that, but so I'm almost surprised when I see someone else. I'm happily surprised, but I'm always surprised when I see someone else in the room. I'll tell you a funny story, a bit of an aside, but this makes me think about this. But when I started practicing 33 years ago, I started at the largest law firm in North Carolina, and I was the first African-American associate hired at this firm. And it was in Charlotte, big firm on the 30th floor, first and 32nd floor and 30th floor of this office tower. I had been there for maybe a month or so, and I was in the men's room, and I was startled because I saw another African American. And then I realized quickly that I was looking at my own reflection in the mirror. And that was really startling to realize that, wow, I'm in such an environment here where there's no one, that looks like me, that I'm startled to even see myself.
That is hilarious. But actually it makes me think of another narrative that I think we've allowed, people of color and to deal with, is this negative narrative of who we are and what we can become. There's one thing for people to hold you back. There's one thing to have systemic structural things make it harder. And then there's this ability to listen to a school counselor that says, Johnny can only go to a 2-year trade school. He doesn't really have the aptitude to do this. Jenny would be better off if she put away XYZ and just went to maybe you can be something that's you don't need to be an engineer. That might be a little bit too much for you, right? There's a lot of math if you want to learn how to do that computer stuff. And so one of the things that your success amplifies is you can become what you dream. And one of the things that you, based on knowing you and what you described, had a strong family influence about achievement. What do we do? What do you and I do? What's our responsibility for those that don't have that set up, that we continue to give them the opportunity to dream bigger, bolder, and not hold themselves back?
Yeah. No, that's a very powerful point, and I think it actually relates to how I would answer this question about being the only person in the room. I think it really starts with having a firm grounding in who you are, and just understanding that who you are. And I just can't overemphasize that. And I agree with you entirely that I was very fortunate to grow up in a family that was a very strong family, with very supportive parents who really impressed upon us to understand who we are, right, and to not be defined by society, to not be defined by how others may see you, but to have your own definition. I think that is fundamental. And so for those who don't have the benefit of having that sort of family structure, they have to find a way to build a sense of self and a sense of who they are, and to ground themselves in that. One of the things that I tell young people is that the most important decision you will make in your life is not whether you go to college or not. It's not not who you marry. It's not what job you take. The most important decision that you will make in your life is your vision of yourself that you adopt for yourself. Like, what is your vision of you? And that decision about how you see yourself will drive all the other decisions that you make. And you have the ability to adopt for yourself your vision for yourself. That is within your control. Now, I don't suggest that it's easy to adopt a favorable view, because we are all influenced by our environment, and society has lots of ways of trying to tell you who you are and what you should dream. But ultimately, that vision of yourself that you adopt for yourself is within your control. And so, so I try to get people to understand that, and then I try to do what I can to try to expose people to possibilities in their lives, so that as they are thinking about their vision for themselves, they are constructing a self-image and a self-vision, that embraces all of their possibilities and is not limited by what society may say about them.
Mm. Ken, that was a lot. That was powerful, and I'm going to repeat it just for amplification, not to try to do anything better. That the biggest decision in your life is creating your vision of you, and it's something that you can control. And the thing that about winning in life is there's so many things that are outside of our control. So you've got to make sure that you control what you can and win in that moment. And part of that winning is with self. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and not adopting the negative narrative, right, that someone else puts forward. And your vision of you is the most important decision that you'll make. I love it. We wanted to take 30, 40 minutes today, and I like to pride myself on knowing when to land the plane. And that is a very, very good way to cap the last kind of question or two. So within that statement, what are some things that you used, you recommend, you've read, that give you that inspiration, that continued good seed, right, to continue that positive narrative, right? So what are some of the places where you get good insight, business, good insight, political, good insight, spiritual, if you're open to sharing some of those things?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Well, I'm a voracious reader, so I'm always reading books, and I like to read a variety of books, but I've read a lot of biographies and autobiographies, in part because I want I want to know the stories of people. You see people who are successful, and it seems like as though that was just inevitable, that they were just meant to be successful. But when you read their stories, you realize that they're just like you, that they have strengths and weaknesses, they have wins and losses, they have fears and insecurities, they have things they're confident about or not. They are human, and that we're all are human and involved in the human experience. And I find that to be inspiring. I also, it helps me to build my own resilience when you realize that life is not truly easy for anyone, that everyone has challenges, and your challenges may be different than others, but no one escapes their challenge. That reminds me of my son. My son was 6 or 7 years old, and we were, this is my dad was still alive. We were in church, and my dad was giving a sermon, and he was talking about everyone has a cross to bear. And he was expounding on that point, and my son was sitting between me and my mom, and he said to my mom, who he calls Grammy, Grammy, I don't have a cross to bear. And she said, keep living. He's now in medical school. I think he probably has found his cross along the way.
That's awesome.
But it's, life is challenging, and so I read about people who've overcome challenges, and I find inspiration, in that. And I read just about a variety of people. I think having, I am a spiritual person. I think that, having something, that a place in your life where you can go for solace, and restoration, something that allows you to, to see beyond what exists immediately and to have some hope for something better, whether that be religion or some other practice that you have. I think that's important. I think you have to create change. You have to first be able to envision it. And so I think cultivating an imagination, things that help you to imagine what can be, and then combine that imagination with work on how to bring it into fruition. We need more people like that who can imagine a future that doesn't exist. And I think that's one of the ways that I sustain my hope, is by having an imagination about what can be, and then working toward that. And so that's the advice I would give. I'd say, read the stories of others. They will inspire you. Develop a sense of hope, however you derive that, and cultivate your imagination of what it is you want to see, and then trying to create it.
That is awesome. I tell you what, whether it is growing the pie so that we can all be involved for a zero-sum game where there's a winner or a loser, whether it is understanding when you're the only one in the room, remembering who you are, to your points around the most important decision is your vision of you. I've got a couple pages of notes. I am thankful that you're willing to spend time and knowledge with our listeners. And I'm cheering for you. I'm pulling for you in all that you're doing. And you are part of the reason that I'm inspired. And we're getting to know each other better, but we also can cheer and see what each other's doing from afar. Yeah. And I'm really excited about what you're putting in for all of us. And I appreciate it.
Well, I just want to say just how proud I am of all that you have done and are doing, from your success in business, to your reaching back to try to provide some breadcrumbs on how others can achieve similar kinds of success, to the inspiration you provide to young people and who are starting businesses and mentoring them and helping them along their way, to providing this forum for people to talk about the important issues that exist in our society. You're making a tremendous difference here, and I'm really proud of what you're doing. I'm happy to be, invited to come join you and do my little part to help you do the great things that you're doing.
All right, my friend. Listen, I want to be careful with your time and respectful. This has been great. Like this is some good nuggets, and this won't be the last that we reach out and we do some things together. And so I want to thank you for your time. But this was awesome.
question my drive. I tell myself I'm worth it, no one's perfect, I gotta try. I'm working at my craft.
This podcast is edited and produced by Earfluence. If you're looking for more information on how full-service podcast production can amplify your voice, build your community, visit earfluence.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon on the Donald Thompson podcast.